You can just feel it, right? Something's different with this team right now. The way they're building, the way they're making moves. It's not random. It's not rushed. It actually feels like there's a real plan behind everything. And as a fan, that's the kind of thing that gets you hyped, because you start to see where this could be going if it all clicks. We're talking about a roster that's getting more versatile, more competitive, and honestly, a lot more fun to watch. There are battles everywhere, new pieces coming in with something to prove, and a real sense that nobody's just being handed a spot. You've got guys who can do a little bit of everything, and that opens up so many possibilities once the season starts. And the best part? This might just be the beginning. If these moves hit the way we think they can, we could be looking at a team that surprises a lot of people real fast. So if you're riding with this squad, go ahead and smash that like button and drop a comment down below. Go Hawks! So I know you're locked in for this season. The Seattle Seahawks are already shaping the identity of their 2026 draft class, and the latest intel coming from ESPN's Jeremy Fowler reveals a very clear pattern in how this front office is thinking, especially when it comes to rebuilding and reinforcing the defense. And the name that keeps standing out in all of this is Bud Clark, a second-round safety who, behind the scenes, looks like he was never just a random pick, but a carefully targeted piece of a much bigger plan. What's fascinating here is that Clark wasn't widely discussed across most draft coverage, but internally, the Seahawks had been locked in on him for a while. The reasoning becomes obvious when you break down the blueprint Seattle is following. This is not just about adding a safety, it's about adding a very specific type of defensive back. Clark fits into a mold that has quietly become one of the defining traits of this roster. Defensive players with cornerback backgrounds who can transition into versatile safety roles. That hybrid profile is something we've already seen work extremely well in Seattle. Julian Love is a prime example, a player who started as a corner and evolved into a productive safety. Even Kobe Bryant, before moving on in free agency, followed a similar path and saw a significant jump in production once he settled into that role. Bud Clark steps right into that lineage, having played both safety and nickel corner during his college career, which immediately increases his value in a system that thrives on flexibility and football IQ. And when you watch the way Clark plays, it becomes even clearer why the Seahawks were so interested. This is a player who attacks the football, reads quarterbacks effectively, and relies heavily on instincts. He's not just reacting, he's anticipating. That's the kind of trait that has historically defined successful defensive backs in Seattle. There's even a stylistic comparison to the way Richard Sherman used to diagnose plays, just translated into a different position on the field. Within Mike Macdonald's system, this kind of versatility isn't just a bonus, it's essential. The defense relies on players who can shift roles, disguise coverages, and adapt mid-play. Clark's ability to operate in multiple alignments gives Seattle more options schematically, and that could allow him to see the field earlier than most rookie safeties. If he develops the way the team expects, this could end up being one of those picks that looks even better a few years down the line than it does today. Now, shifting to the offensive side, there's another storyline emerging that might surprise some fans. First-round running back Jadarian Price is not being handed the keys to the backfield right away. And that's not a knock on his talent. It's more a reflection of how the Seahawks want to structure their offense moving forward. The expectation inside the organization is that Price will have time to develop rather than immediately taking on a bell cow role. In fact, the idea of having a single workhorse running back might not even exist in this system anymore. Under Mike Macdonald, the preference seems to lean toward a committee approach, using multiple backs to keep the group fresh and effective throughout the season. This strategy already showed signs of success. While other teams dealt with injuries and fatigue at the position, Seattle's rotation allowed their backs to stay productive deep into the season. That context makes it easier to understand why Price will be eased into the offense rather than overloaded from day one. And the competition in that running back room is going to be intense. Veterans like Emmanuel Wilson and George Alani bring experience and contrasting skill sets, while younger players continue to push for opportunities. Add in the recovery of Zach Charbonnet, and suddenly you have a crowded, competitive environment where nothing will be given. It has to be earned. What stands out here is how each player offers something different. Wilson brings power, Alani adds vision and cutting ability, and Price introduces explosiveness with strong field awareness. That combination creates what can only be described as an iron sharpens iron situation, where the internal competition could elevate the entire unit. Instead of relying on one star, the Seahawks might end up with one of the deepest and most balanced running back groups in the league. And when you connect all these dots, from the defensive blueprint with Bud Clark to the offensive philosophy with Jadarian Price, you start to see a consistent theme. This is a team that isn't just drafting for talent, it's drafting for fit, adaptability, and long-term system cohesion. The Seahawks aren't chasing quick fixes. They're building something structured, something intentional. Every move seems to align with a broader vision of how this team wants to play on both sides of the ball. And if these early insights are any indication, the 2026 draft class could play a major role in defining that identity moving forward. So now it comes down to you, looking at Bud Clark's fit in the defense and Jadarian Price's role in this evolving offense. Do you think the Seahawks are making the right call with this approach to building their roster? But there's one more layer to this entire situation that makes things even more intriguing, and it revolves around how Seattle is planning to create opportunities beyond traditional roles, especially with a player like Jalen Milroe. This is where Jeremy Fowler's report really starts to shift, from expected to something that could genuinely change the dynamic of the offense. Because when you hear that the Seahawks are actively looking for ways to get Milroe more involved, it's not just about adding depth at quarterback. It's about introducing a completely different dimension to the offense. Milroe is one of the most physically gifted athletes on the roster. His speed, strength, and explosiveness are immediately noticeable, and those traits naturally open the door to creative usage. The challenge, of course, has always been consistency as a passer. Accuracy and decision-making have been areas of concern, and that's exactly why Seattle seems to be approaching this the smart way. Instead of forcing him into a traditional quarterback mold, the coaching staff is reportedly exploring packages that emphasize what he does best. That means designed runs, read option looks, and situational plays, where his athleticism can create mismatches against defenses. This isn't about replacing the starting quarterback or changing the identity of the offense overnight. It's about adding a wrinkle, something defenses have to prepare for but can't fully predict. And if Milroe takes a step forward in his development, even in a limited role, he could become one of those players that quietly shifts momentum in key moments. Think about how valuable that can be in today's NFL. A player who can come in for specific packages, force defenses to adjust on the fly, and create explosive plays without needing a full workload. The comparison to a Taysom Hill-type role isn't far off, but there's also the possibility that Milroe evolves into something even more impactful if his skill set continues to develop. What makes this even more important is when you connect it back to everything else we've discussed. The Seahawks are building a roster based on versatility across the board. On defense, you have hybrid players like Bud Clark, who can move between roles. In the backfield, you have a rotation of running backs with different strengths. And now on offense, you're potentially adding a quarterback package that introduces unpredictability. It's all part of the same philosophy: flexibility, competition, and adaptability. And speaking of competition, we can't ignore what's happening on the offensive line, specifically at the right guard position. While it may not grab headlines the same way skill positions do, this battle could have a major impact on how successful the offense is overall. Anthony Bradford, a veteran in a contract year, is still very much in the mix, and the organization hasn't lost confidence in him despite bringing in Bo Stevens through the draft. What's expected here is a true head-to-head competition that could stretch all the way to Week 1. Stevens brings a style that feels tailor-made for Seattle. Physical, aggressive, and well-suited for zone-blocking schemes. But Bradford has experience, and that matters in a system that requires cohesion across the offensive line. This kind of battle is exactly what you want to see if you're a Seahawks fan. Not because there's uncertainty, but because it raises the floor of the entire unit. Whoever wins the job will have earned it. And whoever doesn't will likely still play a key role as a depth piece capable of stepping in when needed. And when you step back and look at all these storylines together, it paints a very clear picture of where this team is heading. The Seahawks are not relying on a single breakout star from this draft class. Instead, they're building layers, players who fit specific roles, compete at a high level, and contribute to a system designed to maximize strengths rather than expose weaknesses. Bud Clark could anchor a new generation in the secondary. Jadarian Price could become a key piece in a dynamic multi-back system. Jalen Milroe might emerge as one of the most unique offensive weapons on the roster, and battles in the trenches, like the one between Bradford and Stevens, could quietly define how far this team goes. There's a level of intentionality here that's hard to ignore. Every move connects. Every role has a purpose. And if this all comes together the way the Seahawks envision, this draft class might not just be good. It could be foundational for the next era of Seattle football. Now, I want to hear from you. Out of all these developments, which one excites you the most heading into the season? And do you believe this approach can take the Seahawks to the next level? And if you want to stay on top of every single update like this, make sure you subscribe to the channel, leave your like, and click on the video that's on your screen right now. Because the latest Seahawks news, the kind you don't want to miss, you're only going to find it right here. Go Seahawks!